Well, good afternoon. My name is Jens Hoffmann, and together with Adriano Pedrosa, I'm the co-curator of the 12th Istanbul Biennial, which will open on September 15th, 2011. And this afternoon, for the next half an hour, Adriano and I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the Istanbul Biennial, but also talk about biennials in general and the politics around it and the culture of biennials. And I would like to begin to maybe ask Adriano to tell me how when you got asked to do the Istanbul Biennial, how did you start thinking about making an exhibition like this?
Well, it's interesting that we actually, Jens and I have quite sort of similar interests, but actually have quite different approaches. So the process is always rather different, although the interests are often quite overlapping. My first approach is always to look at the history of the exhibition, the history of the several editions, the history of the city, the scene, the local scene there, how that, and we're talking more about a biennial now, but how that particular biennial, how that particular institution talks to other biennials and talks to other exhibitions that are happening in that immediate sort of area, region, or also globally. How the local scene is involved, how the artists are involved in the biennial. The biennial or the exhibition also needs to have a relationship or a dialogue with the past edition or the few past editions. And also to the recent editions of other biennials around the world. So I mean, there are a number of things to consider. And I usually look at those things and see that maybe a biennial done in 2011 is going to be done differently or thought about differently could be thought about differently by the same person in 2013, 15, and so on and so forth. So I think it's really, this is what I would say is the specificity of that site, of that venue, of that history, and of that moment, no?
Yeah, I think that curating a biennial is a particularly complex undertaking at this moment in time, given that the biennial has sort of like developed into this one particular model where the biennial more or less always becomes this large-scale international group exhibition that aims to give the audience an overview of what is going on around the world in the sphere of contemporary art. And do you think that needs to be challenged, that particular concept, that particular sort of biennial convention being this international large-scale group exhibition bringing together art from all over the world? I mean, I think that there's a lot of anticipations in that direction, that the biennial always has to be global. One of the criticisms that I often hear when I go to a biennial is, oh, they don't really have any artists from Asia in the show, or they don't have any artists from Africa in this show. And where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think, again, that sort of position, you can see it changing over time. About 10 years ago, you would see that really started to expect from biennials to have a sort of more global overview of representation of all different regions in the world. I would say that large-scale biennials, such as Basel and such as São Paulo and such as Venice, there is an expectation, well, perhaps not Venice, because they have like 6 months to prepare it, but Basel, for example, where there's like a 4-month period for you to research. So there is a certain expectation that Basel, with all those resources, with all that time, to cover a certain, all regions of the world, not necessarily all countries. But when it comes to, I think, a project like Istanbul, which I don't think is a large-scale project, I would say it's a maybe mid-scale to large project, but it's not like an enormous project. You don't have like an enormous amount of time or space or resources to develop that.
It's like one of the most or largest biennials in the world. So I think it's definitely a large-scale project. I
wouldn't say I would put it like in comparison to São Paulo, for example, or Basel is about a third of that. So I think even in terms of resources, I would think, and this is perhaps something that we actually have different views on that. I think that we've come to a time that you're not expected to represent sort of all regions in the globe in the exhibition. So I'm actually happy to sort of look at certain regions, of course, always beyond my own region, which is Brazil and South America, always beyond, of course, the Euro-Atlantic, Western Europe and North America, for example, always going beyond that. I think that's really an expectation. But I don't feel obliged to bring artists, for example, from all Asia. So I sort of, or for the entire, but I try to do certain researches with each project. This time I try to develop more, of course, always going back to the Latin American region where I work, but also this time with the Middle East and a little bit with Eastern Europe. But how do you of course, have a different view on that? In terms of what regions you need to bring? I mean, this is a discussion that we've had throughout the process, no?
Well, one of the interesting things about biennials, particularly in the late 90s and the early 2000s, was really that biennials were the vehicle for bringing artists from other parts of the world onto an international platform. I think if it wouldn't have been for biennials, many artists from Latin America, Asia, or Africa would have, never had a large audience. So in that sense, I think the biennials did a very important service at that particular point. Mm-hmm. But as they develop, it seems that the model becomes stale, and we need to think about different types of ways of making biennials. And
yeah, I know that, I mean...
Why does a biennial, for example, always have to have, like, let's say, 60, 70, or 100 artists? Why couldn't it just be 12?
Well, you see different editions of biennials challenging that. The last Taipei biennial, for example, curated by Tirdad Zoga and a co-curator from Taiwan, whose name now I forget, they actually try to work with like much fewer artists. So I think there are certain features that you always perhaps associate with the model of biennial exhibitions, but you can always challenge these. I mean, it's always interesting maybe to look at different things and see how you can challenge them, not just replicate the model. We've tried to do that in a number of ways, in this edition. Even looking, and I think it's certain challenges that have been possible to sort of carry out or to be proposed in a place like Istanbul, and wouldn't make sense in other places. For example, about the title of the exhibition, about the list of artists in the show, about the number of artists, about the several, particularly some marketing strategies of the biennials. Would you like to speak about that, for example?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. I think that, challenging these kind of conventions, it's in itself a convention as well. And I think that perhaps with some of the things that you just spoke about, we're trying to sort of like go a middle way almost now. On the one hand, our biennial seems to become more traditional in a certain way because we're moving back into a white cube environment.
With our project?
With the exhibition, where the Istanbul Biennial had traditionally been all out over the city in different historical sites. People had to travel throughout the city. And as part of the experience of seeing the work in the biennial, they also experienced the city and could perhaps make certain relations between the artworks on view, the curatorial ideas, and the social and political fabric of the city. When we began working on the biennial about a year and a half ago, the foundation, the Istanbul Foundation for Art and Culture that organizes the Istanbul Biennial, asked us to propose a title, and at which point we didn't even have a concept ready yet. So we were thinking about how we could find a way around it, and I thought about Documenta that takes place every 5 years in Kassel. Next year is Documenta 13, and I said to the director of the foundation, why don't we just call it Istanbul, the 12th Istanbul Biennial, and not really even have a title. And in a conversation that we then had was, well, let's call it Untitled, because we really don't want to give it a title. On the one hand, because of not being able to have a proper title that made sense to us, because we didn't even know what we wanted to do, but on the other hand also to perhaps challenge certain ways of how biennials are titled that often have these rather obscure
all-encompassing.
Yeah, what comes to mind, for example?
Plateau of Humankind.
Yeah.
Illuminations, or
well, illuminations in itself is maybe not even that strange, but it's like the capitalization of the last part of illuminations that are a bit odd.
Well, we actually...
Do you remember the Venice Biennial by Francesco Bonami that was called the Dictatorship of the Viewer?
Yeah. We actually compiled a list, an interesting list, which we will include in one of our publications, which is basically a compilation of titles of like all these biennials that have happened in the last 10, 20 years or so. And after looking at that, that also sort of was a way of proposing, after this, reflecting on these different titles and what they actually bring to the exhibition, we thought of just going for the Untitled, which is in a way is a resistance to titling the exhibition, but also carries its own meanings. It's supposed to evoke or reference the titling strategies of Felix Gonzalez-Torres, who is the sort of the artist that inspires the research and inspires the curatorial process, the selection of artworks in the exhibition. So Untitled, parenthesis, 12th Istanbul Biennial, comma, 2011 in italics. We also, it was curious that we convinced the institution to change the actual name of the biennial. It is no longer an international Istanbul Biennial, it's just the Istanbul Biennial. Our argument was that the exhibition did not need to sort of promote or affirm its international character in its title because it was already that.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the exhibition itself. And going back to the first question that I posed to you, how do you start thinking about the biennial, and how do you start thinking about the Istanbul Biennial? So one of the things that Adriano and I did was we sort of like locked ourselves in a hotel room, looked at all the catalogs of the previous biennials, and started reading aloud the introductions to the of all the other biennials that had happened previously. And one of the things that we noticed was that there was always a very strong interest in talking about the relationship between arts and politics, and specifically the politics of the Middle East and the politics of Turkey and Istanbul. And we had seen, I mean, I think I've seen probably 6 Istanbul Biennials.
Yeah, fortunately, I mean, you've been seeing them since '97. I've been seeing them since 2001. So it's like, at least we have like this relationship with the biennial itself.
Yeah, so one thing that we noticed was that over time, the artwork became more and more political till the last biennial, the 11th Istanbul Biennial that was curated by WHW, What, How and For Whom, curatorial collective from Zagreb, that, to sum it up, was in some way a sort of reconsideration of Marxism and propagating Marxism as a sort of alternative political model. And a lot of artwork that was exhibited there was very politically minded, but in our opinion lacked a lot in terms of their aesthetics and forms. So we were both talking about what artists and what artworks interests us that actually have this possibility of being politically progressive as well as aesthetically innovative. And we started thinking about the work of Felix Gonzalez-Torres, a Cuban-born artist who later died of AIDS-related illnesses in Miami and lived for most of his life in New York. And Felix Gonzalez-Torres became sort of like the guiding figure of the biennial, and he always used the title, or titled his pieces Untitled with a further description in parentheses. So our proposal of calling the Istanbul Biennial Untitled Istanbul Biennial also related back to the way of him titling his pieces like this.
Yes, Felix is also, of course, important. We both have worked with him, I actually corresponded with him in the early 90s when he was alive. We worked with him for like, I guess, 10 years. At least the first show that I did was in '99, including works of his. So he's always been an important referential artist for me. Yeah. Felix is, of course, this example of an artist that articulates the political, social, personal content with the aesthetic, formal, and visual concern as well. But he's also an artist that somehow between the North and the South, because he's Latin American and he lived in the US, He's also a gay artist that died of HIV. So it's an artist that comes in as sort of also an emblem of the dialogue and the conversation that I have between Jens, who's based in San Francisco, and myself, based in São Paulo. And again, as an example of an artist that deals with all these themes in a very sort of complex way, it was important for us. He was featured in the Istanbul Biennial in 1997 in Rosa Martinez's exhibition. It was important for us throughout the process that we were researching. We considered a number of ways of maybe to try to bring the work, because of course he's not that well known in Istanbul and in Turkey as he is perhaps here, for example, where there was a survey of his exhibition last year at the Byler Foundation. And in the end, we decided, I think looking back at how we've worked with him, we have selected 5 individual works by Felix who are the inspiration of 5 different sections of the exhibition. Felix is not present in the show, and he's not sort of a required reading or a footnote that you need to know in order to understand the work. To understand the biennial, Felix is a starting point for us to research and for us to construct the biennial. And the 5 works, if some of you are familiar, are Untitled Ross, Untitled Passport, Untitled Death by Gun, Untitled Blood Work, and Untitled Period. And the 5 themes then are history, Passport, which is an exhibition about migration and borders and national identity and maps. Ross, which is an exhibition about gay themes and relationships and love and family. Death by Gun, which is an exhibition about violence. Just to put it in very simple terms, of course, for you to understand. The Bloodwork piece is an exhibition about abstraction, and particularly geometric abstraction, and how that can have political and bodily and personal meanings beyond pure abstraction. And history, of course, is an exhibition above all about the writing of history and the history of writing as well. Mm-hmm. In terms of the form of the exhibition, the morphology or the sort of language of the exhibition, of the group shows and the solo shows, perhaps you'd like to speak about that?
Well, yeah, as Adriano said, there will be these 5 group exhibitions. They will all take place in their own individual space that will not be divided. You actually have the possibility to see all the works at the same time. And in addition to this, we have invited about 53 artists to make solo presentations, which means around these group shows, you will have other gallery spaces that each will hold the presentation of one individual artist.
I think that's also something quite new. It's not the language of the exhibition itself.
The structure, I think the combination of group and solo exhibitions is, I think, something that is unlike most other biennials, but I feel like, and it somehow challenges the conventional structure of a biennial, which usually is always just one large-scale group exhibition. But at the same time, I don't think it is necessarily really like an aggressive way of challenging the biennial. It's just another way of approaching it and seeing what other possibilities there are. Maybe also with the idea in mind that we are trying to diversify the models that can be utilized for making a biennial.
Well, I think it's quite interesting to look at this new sort of, well, not new, because I mean, even we worked with this type of morphology, if you like, in San Juan. Even the São Paulo Biennial in '98, when I worked with Paulo Heckenhoff, that was also, there were a number of group shows and a number of what we call in solo shows. Of course, everything is a whole group show. But what we're talking about is, for you to imagine, is that you would encounter in one space a cabinet show of maybe 10, 15 or 20 artworks from different artists, and then what you, in the rest of the pavilion or the rest of the show, you would encounter these solo presences, which is usually what you see in biennials. What you see in biennial exhibitions is almost the equivalent of a solo show artist in a mid-scale gallery space, no? So you go from solo show to solo show. This is what you see, for example, in Venice, in the Arsenali, each artist with a sort of slightly similar amount of space. So what we're proposing is a different sort of configuration. And I think the group shows in particular, which is something that you don't see, the group show you would see maybe in a museum or even in a gallery, the group shows in particular are more cabinet style shows, and they allow for a more precise articulation of the curatorial proposals, let's say. So in one particular show of the Untitled Passport, for example, you might see 10, 15 works from different artists, and there the curatorial proposal will be made more clear, whereas when you are navigating throughout the solo shows, you might approach closely the worlds and researches and the proposal of individual artists. So this type of navigation actually recalls what, for example, Hans-Ulrich Obrist once told me recently. When we were talking about biennial exhibitions and the often large-scale format, he was telling me how he's today more interested in intimate projects. So these cabinet shows, these small group shows, actually some of them are quite large, but always in one single room, they allow for that intimacy. I mean, you might have one artist with a very small work, and that's his only presence in that exhibition. So that allows for a different type of, even for us, no? And we are curators who are actually working a lot in this type of format, no? More so perhaps than the sort of large solo presences. We are curators that are very much interested also in bringing certain artworks together and juxtaposing them and sort of allowing new meaning to be sort of created or suggested through these juxtapositions.
Yeah, it's a way of staging an exhibition, I would say, where you really have different type of works coming together from perhaps quite different context and creating new meaning out of the found material and the artworks there. What else shall we?
Yeah, actually,
talk?
another curious sort of perhaps detail of this whole process is the reason why we are not releasing an artist list, which is actually related to this as well. No, why? Because we have been asked about this, and we decided not to release an artist list before the opening.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't even make such a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
It's not because we want to keep it secret or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, why didn't we want to release an artist list?
Well, there's several reasons. First of all, we were sort of challenging in a way the sort of traditional marketing strategies of the biennial, where you receive the e-flux, there's the title of the biennial, there's the name of the curators, there's the concept, and there is the list of artists in the show. And actually for our first press meeting last year, what we did was we compiled 2 years of e-flux announcements, all related to biennials. And there's one probably every 2 or 3 days in e-flux, you're all familiar with e-flux, of biennial related events. So Istanbul, of course, it has the sort of privileged position of having a lot of attention to itself already. And we thought that this type of marketing strategy was something that went against our idea for the exhibition. Often when you see the list of artists, the title of the show, the curators, the concept, you already are tempted, and I find myself doing that a lot, you're already tempted to consume and understand and sometimes prejudge the exhibition itself just by looking at the list of artists.
It's probably also important to say that the names of the curators are not on any of the press material either.
Yeah. And because of that, we wanted to refocus, to bring the focus again into the exhibition itself and not to this e-flux representation of the biennial. There's also the fact, I think it's important, and that's something that came along afterwards, because of this presence of the solo presence and the group show presences, we, of course, have a considerably large number of artists, which we actually do not count. I, at present, do not know how many artists we have in the show. I know the solo show artists, but the group shows, it would be misleading to compile a single list, I believe, of all these artists.
Well, yeah. Because of the structure of the exhibition.
Because of the structure of the exhibition, yeah. But it's not that it's a secret. I know Catherine David, for example, did that in Documented 10, but that was more, I think, a concern with the market and a concern with keeping this list secret. The list is not necessarily a secret. I mean, things are, you know, the information is flowing out there. Of course, not the full list, but still, I think it responds a little bit to that. And because of the fact that we were not releasing the artist list, we also stopped releasing the names of the curators. So if you look at the last efflux of the Istanbul Biennial, they mentioned the architect and the graphic designer and nothing else. No curators and no artists, but then of course the title and the concept is there, and the dates. And we hope to see you all there on September 15th and 16th.
Let me ask you one last question. One last question. Since we're here at an art fair, you know, when I began working in the field of arts in the late 90s, the art market was perhaps not as strong as it is now. There were not that many art fairs, and it was kind of very clear what museums were doing, and what galleries were doing, or what biennials were doing, and what art fairs were doing. And how today it seems that the borders are more and more fluid. And I wonder, what would you say is really the difference between, apart from like the commercial aspect, between a biennial and an art fair like Art Basel?
I think the art fair, there's no curatorial conception or curatorial proposal or preoccupation whatsoever. It's nothing at all.
But there are curated parts here in Art Basel, for example.
Yeah, in Parcours, yes.
Yeah, or Art Unlimited.
Yeah, but I don't
think
there's a curatorial concern there. I mean, there's a selection concern. Maybe, I mean, for example, the most important selection is definitely the booths that are participating in the art fair.
And you feel that most of the biennials have a very clear, a very precise idea for what they're doing in the exhibition? Don't you feel that that also becomes more and more loose?
Well, but the most interesting and challenging and complex biennials that we're looking at as more referential, they have that. That's their aspiration, that's their concern. And I think one thing, for example, for me, that distinguishes Istanbul than all the other biennials is not really the resources, because there are many other biennials that have a lot more money than that. It's really the independence and the autonomy that they give to the curators that have been selected by a committee. So it's actually maybe the sort of independence that they are able to offer to the curator. Yeah. And that's why it makes it a biennial that's so interesting.
Yeah, I don't know, for me the borders become more and more fluid.
Yeah,
and I don't necessarily know if I like that and if I find that a good development, but...
well, yeah, people, for example, Unlimited looks like a biennial. Some people say that. And I said, well, it looks like a biennial, but there's no concept, there's no curatorial preoccupation. It's just lots of works one place next to each other. There's nothing beyond that. It's a great biennial without a concept, without a theme, without a curatorial
maybe I'm exaggerating when I say that
I
I feel that some biennials have as much of a concept as Art Unlimited.
And then people say, oh, but what is the concept behind Unlimited? I say, no, it's all right. I mean, it's an art fair. You don't have to look for a concept in Unlimited. If you're looking for a concept in Art Unlimited, you're going to be frustrated. It's just unlimited in scale or in proposals. But there's not, you can't expect those works. It's not an expectation to have sort of a preoccupation about the concerns. Look at it from the other side, Adriano. Let me just complete. The positioning and the juxtaposition and the dialogues between each works, it's not something that goes through the minds of someone that's putting that together, I think. Don't you think?
Well, it's curated, right? They have a curator for that.
But I think it's like curated without a concept then. You can still call it curators.
Oh, that's interesting. Now we come to an interesting point.
Maybe that's what it is. I mean, I think it's more of a selection. They receive applications.
Well, today so many things are curated, no?
Well, yeah,
menus are curated, the lineup of music in a discotheque is curated.
That's perhaps why, if you look at, for example, I mean, yeah, there's total abuse of the word curators. And that's why perhaps you see someone like Documenta starting to step back from the notion of curators, and they call their curators agents. No, Carolyn has done that with her.
Our title is Curators in Istanbul.
Yeah, no, I think I'm comfortable with the term curators. I mean, it's fine, but
I don't use it anymore when I
But don't you think when they start using agents, for example, maybe that's a way of sort of stepping back from, because you can see the curator as an agent in a way, no? But maybe the sort of stepping back from the use of that notion already indicates a certain concern with the abuse of the term. I mean, you see all over the place, no?
Yeah. I was
agents.
reading in a German newspaper the other day that the curator is now one of the most desired occupations of German youth, where it used to be to become a pop star or an actor. Now all of a sudden it became an artist, and then it became a curator.
I think there will eventually be, maybe it's this generation in the last maybe 5 years, in the 5 years to come, you see a lot of, I mean, when I started working as a curator, there weren't as many curatorial programs, and now you see like many curators coming out there. And I wonder if it's just suddenly they're all going to come to sort of their senses and realize that this is almost an impossible, you know, such a difficult profession.
It's a difficult profession, I guess. Lots of people underestimate it.
If you're an independent.
Lots of people underestimate what you have to do as a curator. Obviously, it's not only about selecting something and putting that into a new order. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, and thank all of you. Oh, wait, there's a question.
All right, question.
There's a question.
I think the microphone, we need the microphone, otherwise we don't record it, please.
I want to ask Jens a question about curating within an art fair, your art Parcours program. Because to me, there is a big difference, or should be a big difference, between a biennial and an art fair. And when Sam came a few years ago to London and said you wouldn't have to go to biennials anymore, you just come to Art Basel, you come to Art Miami, I got very offended.
Who said that?
And Sam.
Sam being?
The ex-director.
Sam Keller.
Sam Keller came and he made this announcement.
She's asking me a question.
So I'm asking you how you feel as a curator being involved within an art fair and how you see the distinction and these distinctions blurring. And whether you still feel comfortable with that.
I feel comfortable, and I think that Adriano made a good point. Yeah, the biennial or a larger exhibition is a very sort of, you know, carefully created curatorial argument, whereas maybe the display of artworks in an artwork has as a main goal is to you know, be part of the art market and the economy. And I think a project like Art Parcours or this series of talks is something that is a side benefit for the visitor. They get to, you know, listen to curators talk or to artists talks, or they get to see other work that is maybe displayed with, you know, more curatorial intentions. Yeah. Art Basel pays for Art Parcours. Yeah, yeah.
I'm just trying to distinguish how you see yourself as an agent of Art Basel, or whether you see yourself as an independent
Well, I work
curator.
on this. Yeah, I work as an independent curator for Art Basel to make this project happen. I don't know if you have seen it yet. You will clearly see a difference between what is happening there and that project and what's happening here. And it's two different things, but you know, they're just under one roof. One more question. I think we're running out of time. There in the back. Hello? Oh, you need a microphone.
Yeah, they need a microphone to record and translate.
Yeah, this is a question to Jens Hoffmann. I would like to know your involvement with Art Parcours, and if you have just chosen the artists that have been offered by the galleries. This is one point, and the second point is if you have decided on the artists from the galleries that are taking part in the Art Basel, did you look for the locations yourself, and did you propose the locations, or have they been proposed either by the artists themselves or by some advisor in Basel?
I selected the artists from the pool of artists that are represented by the galleries that are participating in Art Basel. I selected the artists and proposed to them probably about 25 different sites in the area where this project is taking place now. The artists selected the sites, came to Basel, looked at the different venues, and together we decided what work would, you know, be appropriate to exhibit. I selected the sites together with the artists. We developed these projects together. sometimes there was a project that I was interested in, and I was trying to find a venue, a site here in the city that would work to present this piece. For example, the Janet Cardiff piece that is here was a piece that I saw last year that I liked a lot, and I felt that would be an interesting piece to exhibit because of its sort of surreal character, to exhibit here in Basel. So there were different ways of how this came together, but the initial selection of the artist and the locations was done by the curator, which in this case was me. Can we have one more question, or are we done with time? It's over? Okay. Sorry, I think we are done. We can talk after this.